many slave castles on the coast of Africa. There were approximately 40 castles up the Gold Coast of West Africa, now known as Ghana. They were built by European traders. Most people don't know that these were used for trading timber and gold, but were later used in the transatlantic slave trade. These castles were where the slaves were stored before going off to the Americas. This gives the castles the nickname of the Gate of No Return. These castles were first built in the mid-1600s, but were later added onto. After the castles were done, they could hold well over 1,000 slaves, just not comfortably. These castles had very poorly ventilated dungeons, with no space to lay down and a very limited supply of light and oxygen. There was no water or sanitation, which caused all of the floors to be covered in human waste. This came to be a serious cause of death for many of the slaves, for many of them fell ill. While the men slaves were separated from the women were continuously raped by the captors. There was also a room for slaves who revolted. It was a small, pitch-black cell where the revolters were left to die. After setting foot into these castles, you could spend up to 3 months in these conditions before getting shipped off to the New World. For many slaves, this was the last thing they saw before they died on the way to the New World.
The third leg of triangular trade is called the Middle Passage. This was after the slaves left the castles and were forced onto ships. This was called the point of no return. While on the ships, they were separated into 2 groups, men and women and children. The slaves on the ships were kept in many decks between the normal decks. The slaves were forced to lay down to conserve space. Because of this and the fact that they were chained to each other, the slaves rarely made it to the bucket they were given to use for a bathroom. It was common that they would simply go where they were. This caused disease to break out and spread. When people died, they would simply throw them over the side of the boat. Others died from starvation due to the fact that most slaves were fed once or less each day. The slaves that survived the Middle Passage were then sold to plantation owners on the other side of the world.